Welcome back. Now we've got the warm-up, the starter out of the way. We're going to move on to what is probably the main course of the day in terms of Av3k versus toxjq, a matchup that many of you have seen before, but it's been going on for well over a decade, these two. And it's lovely to see Av3k back. I know we've missed him for a couple of weeks now, and we've obviously got the beast in Tox as well. What's your take on this one, Flea?
I mean, these are two tried and tested veterans, right? They have been in the scene about as long as anyone that's currently in the Quake Pro League. But first, let us take a moment to talk about Av3k. Currently representing Team Endpoint, Av3k has so far had 6 wins and 8 losses this season, with his most recent match being up against Wenger, which he dropped as well. Now, Av3k currently 9th position, so still has a shot at making it in that top 8. And he can always surprise, right? We have seen Av3k do some great things on land. We have seen him top the weeklies in previous seasons as well. So great things to be expected from this man.
Yeah, and we can see his, a dichotomy. It's either a 3-0 win or a 3-0 loss pretty much across the board. I see he lost 3-0 to Maxter. I don't know how that's possible. That must be a typo. Pretty sure he couldn't have lost to Maxter. But the rest, yeah, you can see some hit and misses here. And that's kind of Av3k in a nutshell. When he turns up to play, he just looks incredible. But then in other weeks, he just doesn't hit the mark. So one of these frustrating players, because when everything clicks, he really is one of the best players in the league. And it's just one of those levels of consistency we need to see more from him.
Now his opponent ain't no slouch either. toxjq, the Terminator, greatest Quake 4 player of all time, and a man who's made his mark on Quake like none other. And today we're gonna see him in action once more. He's a bit of a fan favorite. So far hasn't had the best season. 3 wins so far next to 11 losses, most recently against Dramis. And one of the worrying things about this, Dan, we're about to see the scores. toxjq hasn't won a map in 4 series.
Yeah, I just made a point about consistency and I just self-owned myself because I forgot he's playing the most inconsistent player, most frustrating player to watch in the league. And yeah, everybody loves Tox. He has so much good quality to bring to the game, and yet we can see from the scores here, it's not vindicated, and it's because of that lack of temperament now, the lack of strategy in many instances, and just so many of these matchups have been incredibly close, and he just lacks the finesse to turn that into victories, which is so ironic considering the pedigree of the player we're talking about. We normally look at people maturing into the scene, but Tox has almost gone the reverse in that he's become more temperamental in his play, more erratic in his play, and he's lost that championship quality that he used to have. He's still in there somewhere, obviously just not unable to dedicate the amount of time he used to the game and everything like that. He's still a quality player, but it's just frustrating when you know what he can do and the results that come with it.
Now, to dissect this matchup a bit further, we do have the picks and bans ready for us. So let's take a look before we jump into the series itself, starting it off with Blood Covenant, where hello, Tox on Clutch. Now that is something that is going to make for an interesting series, no doubt, versus Av3k on the Nyx. And Nyx is a bit of a strange pick here to start things off with. I feel like when you could have picked Slash, you could have picked Athena. So not quite sure what the reasoning was behind the Nyx. I saw Av3k talked about it himself on that podcast that he has with Wenger, where he said that maybe it was just the Polish sun, the heat wave that just made him do something. Now then we have Corrupted Keep, BJ versus Ranger, and then to settle things, it's Veil of Nav, where we get the Death Knight versus the Eisen. Dan, your thoughts?
I mean, my thoughts is Clutch on toxjq is just something we don't see. And so that's the most interesting one. I think from my understanding of Av3k and the way he picks is he just picks what he's feeling, often comfort picks. And so Eisen, you always pretty much see in his repertoire. Ranger as well, he just loves these more BQ3 style champions, the medium champions in particular. And Nyx is just one of the champions. Maybe he likes to play it on Blood Covenant, who knows? But he doesn't often give too much thought as to what his opponent is playing. On Tox's side, fairly similar, but this week we've got a little bit more erratic picks in the Clutch and somewhat in the Death Knight. We obviously see the Death Knight a little bit more in the meta nowadays, but not as much as we used to. But Veil is one of the maps where you would often see it on and can be used to great effect. So this is going to be a little bit more of a wild one, if I'm honest, because The most interesting one is the BJ Uncorrupted Keep. We would often see something like a Strog on there, but with the Strog being banned, it lends itself nicely to the way Tox wants to play. So yeah, this is going to be, I think this is going to be a brawl fleet. That's all I can say.
Could very well be. Now, historically speaking, Dan, they've played 7 matches between the two of them throughout the Quake Pro League, and it's actually been Tox who won 5 out of those 7. However, the most recent 2 have gone to Av3k in pretty convincing 3-0 fashion as well. So Toxic initially appeared to have the upper hand over Av3k, but sometime towards late 2020, that has kind of changed, and now Av3k seems to be doing considerably better than Toxic. Now, this first map, to me, is a bit of an enigma. Nyx versus Clutch on Blood Covenant, something that I feel like we haven't seen in a long time, especially as a first map where all the champions are still open. So this is going to be a very interesting one. But Dan, I'm going to put you on the spot. Who do you think is going to take it? I don't think it's going to be a surprise based on your comments so far, but predictions.
I'm going to say 3-0 Av3k. I just feel that I don't know what kind of shape Av3k's in, but from what we've seen in the league so far, when Av3k turned up to play, I would assume he should be taking this one. I think it could be a 2-1 to Av3k, but I don't see a world in which Tox wins the set.
Yeah. Fully agreed. I'm leaning towards a 3-0 for Av3k as well. Toxic, if he has a good map, if his aim is on point, if he doesn't get tilted and he, sticks to that core gameplay of his and doesn't go off the rails in the 6th, 7th minute by just throwing himself at his opponents and widening that gap in scoreline, he might be able to take away one map, but overall, I do think that Av3k should have this one in the back.
I also feel that Tox's playstyle can play into Av3k's strengths as well, and that Av3k is somebody who wants to fight. As great as Tox's aim is, I actually think Av3k's damage output is even higher when he's on form. So I think Tox actually needs to be a little bit careful with his aggression in this one. But we are starting on Tox's POV with that clutch, which I genuinely cannot say I've ever seen. So I'm assuming he's comfortable enough on it, if he's picked it.
Yeah, let's see. Toxic, that's a solid amount of damage. With the heavy nail gun from that distance, he's got to be careful though. Clutch is a big target. And Toxic just burned most of his stack against that LG while he didn't really have anything to retaliate with. Finally lands a rail, but it's going to be too little, too late. Av3k pushes through relentlessly. Toxic, I feel like that was just the weapon deficit against him right there. He didn't have an LG, he was just kind of firing off rockets, hoping for something to connect, whereas Av3k consistently dealt damage.
Yeah, and already that shows a slightly worrying sign in that he maybe isn't as comfortable on the clutch as you think, because that is a situation you should not be in. You should not be trying to engage in a mid-range fight as a clutch when you don't have any weapons. So already 1-0 down, not the best. He has got his shield back up now, which is obviously going to be highly valuable, and he's been forced to slow down the tempo.
Yeah, those moments of downtime definitely favor Tox. When he doesn't have his shield, he wants to avoid these engagements. The shield is really Clutch's bread and butter. And Toxic does not want to take the fight without it. That's a good rail. But this is risky though, because Nyx is such a small, nimble target, and Clutch is so big. Like, Av3k isn't gonna miss those shots, so even with the shield, you're kind of setting yourself up to take a lot of damage. Also, he doesn't have rockets. He was standing right next to him, he didn't pick him up.
That was one of the most interesting uses of the shield I've ever seen. I don't know if he intended to rush but got hit by a rail, so stopped it, but otherwise he just popped it to take up a rail duel. Aggressive Ghost Walk coming out here. Tox is in the vicinity, shield up once again, using that very liberally so far. Doesn't even been able to get out without taking any extra damage. He's in this time with the rockets, but Av3k's there, able to do enough damage as well to stall the advances of the clutch. And unusual duel so far.
Most definitely. And still, just a 1 frag difference. Good rail from Tox. Misses the second one. Mega will be going towards Av3k. Heavy not up for another 15 seconds. This is the Polish player. His opportunity to add another frag to the board, and he is going to take it. Quick on the drop down, and Toxic even uses the shield there, Dan, so that means that he doesn't have it up. at least for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, this is obviously a time where you would expect Av3k to pick up the tempo, rocket jump up. Aggressive ghost walk as well. Tox trying to defend, but has to get out. He knows how vulnerable he is without that shield. As I say that, he's doubled back to just try and take another engagement. I think he forgets he's playing clutch sometimes.
Another interesting thing to consider is the management of the hourglasses, the time shards, right? Because when you're Av3k, you don't just want to go and throw away, you know, your ghost walk. Oh, this is good for Tox. Av3k doesn't have the ghost walk, but still he falls short and can't secure the frag. Out comes the tribal. toxjq, I don't think this is a fight you want to take. Av3k first up the bounce pad. Should be able to walk away with Mega as well. If he lands one rail, I think this is going to be over for Tox. One rail and Av3k is no doubt going to secure it. Tox avoids all damage. But as I was saying then, the hourglasses are very important to manage because both of these champions are very ability focused, right? And when you're Av3k, you want to deny those hourglasses, but you also don't want to just keep using your ability over and over and put yourself at risk. So this is a bit of a tricky matchup for Av3k in trying to manage that.
Didn't Clutch's shield used to show Nick's invis? Do I remember that right?
Yes.
Yeah, that was ridiculous.
Clutch's shield used to do a lot of things.
Yeah, I used to.
That robot. That robot has had his abilities changed about as much as any champion in the
V1 shield was insane.
And he used to have a damage reduction when he wasn't moving either, so he had like a passive. So, yeah, Clutch is an interesting champion at this point, very niche, right? If you can play him well, he can be such an effective tool of destruction, but he's also such a risk. And for most players, I think he's just too much of a risk to take, right? Because when you get out of control, when you don't have that shield, you're just a really, really big target. Now, Tox.
Yeah.
Putting himself actually in the driver's seat right now, doing good amount of damage, massive stack advantage. Still 3 frags down, but he's got half the map to work with still.
Yeah, and he's keeping in this, considering how well Av3k's been playing and how much control Av3k's been playing. Tox is still keeping in this. And we do know how much the clutch can snowball. At the moment, though, he's not really playing like a traditional clutch. He's just playing his playstyle, but playing a clutch, if that makes sense. He hasn't truly adapted to the way in which a clutch should be played. That's neither here nor there, but he's definitely not being the most efficient he can be.
Tox not nailing the kill shots either. He's had multiple opportunities to finally get that frag, missing the crucial rail again. Well, that one wouldn't have killed, but 20 seconds earlier, and he did have Av3k in his sights, missing the critical shot, and now Av3k's got the height advantage, he's got the high ground, plus he's got the better stack. Heavy's about to spawn, he's the first one to fall back on it, and toxjq kind of squandered a really good opportunity, I feel like, Dan.
Yeah, and toxjq's finding it really hard to have any sort of control on map presence at the moment. He's been relegated to the low ground for large periods of this map. Fortunately, Av3k isn't doing as much damage as you would expect him to. Has missed some fairly easy shots in this duel, but Tox has been fairly adept now in the last 2 or 3 minutes at slowing the tempo down and not exposing himself as much as he was in the opening engagements. But at the same time, he hasn't shown a lot as to how he intends to get back into this game. And since Av3k got this lead, he's also been sparing with the amount he's using the Ghost Walk. So realizes it's that period of the game now where he has to be more defensive, doesn't need to extend his lead further.
At this point, toxjq is gonna start feeling the time pressure. 3 minutes, 3 frags, perfectly doable, but Nyx, right? You gotta get through that ghost walk first, and you gotta find her again. Oh, there we go. Av3k actually using it. That's interesting. Makes a move straight onto the Mega. Excellent play by Av3k right there.
Yeah, Tox forgetting items exist. But he's quite happy picking up the lights at the moment.
Oh, big
Oh,
rocket.
lovely rocket though, yeah. Can't connect with the rail. That would have been huge. Av3k hasn't got the Ghost Walk up for another 20 seconds or so, but now has the heavy, and Tox unable to contest, giving Av3k a huge lifeline.
And that LG, yeah, that's murderous.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. It's all falling apart for toxjq. He had genuine opportunities then, multiple of them even.
Yeah.
But as you said, as you kind of suspected towards the beginning, right? Maybe Tox just isn't as comfortable playing clutch. Maybe he is just not that confident in his ability. But, right, we know that Tox is out of the range of players who can make top 8, right? So at this point, he's gonna have to go through the group stage at Quake on no matter what. So maybe this is just, you know, he's been playing more often, he's been grinding the game, daily matches, getting ready. Maybe this is just a way of kind of experimenting, right? Like, why not try something new? Maybe he's working on something for QuakeCon.
Yeah, this is the new tech apparently, and I admire the ambition. Execution was definitely lacking, both in terms of, well, strategy, mechanics, and timing actually. So all of the key ingredients weren't there, but I also do respect that he kept it competitive. You know, 6-1 now is still a respectable scoreline, all things considered. But the worrying parts for me is that yes, he's definitely trying, he's definitely learning the champion, but didn't play around the skill set of the clutch enough to validate it as a pick just yet. So, you know, clutch can work. I talked about it in the last set, in that these players who are struggling otherwise to maybe pick up sets need to be playing these type of champions, because these champions can break the game for you. But he's got a bit of work to do to perfect it.
Now, map 1, over and done. toxjq managed to get at least a few frags in towards the end, but it is all too little, too late. And now both players can already set their sights on the next map, which is going to be Corrupted Keep, Dan. No railgun, and it'll be BJ, played by Tox, versus Av3k on the Ranger.
Yeah, I do prefer the Ranger in this matchup a little bit more. I think the passive and the orb just gives you the opportunity to play a much faster tempo, to maintain that positional presence in the mid ground. But we know what the dual wield can bring with the BJ at any one point. And if Tox gets into that flow and starts connecting, that's when it can be either a lifesaver or a game breaker. So I don't think it's as important as it was maybe quite a while ago. I think the positional play of the players now and the opportunity to do that mid-range damage makes something like a Ranger slightly more valuable. But at the end of the day, you know, even just a simple 25 HP recoup can add up over time as well.
Yeah, a little less important on this map because there's no rail, right? And I think that that's usually one of the main uses of that passive health regeneration, to put you above the railable threshold. So that won't come into play here. But indeed, still a very viable champion. I would agree that I favor the Ranger slightly, just because the orb is so versatile. You can use it for position, for damage, defensive, offensive. We saw, right, just how expertly Kilson used it earlier when he played Tron. But on the other hand, it's Tox. Tox, infamous for his lightning gun, his prowess with that weapon. And if you then double it, add another LG to the mix, that can be absolutely brutal. And Av3k, no doubt aware of that, he is going to kind of have to play around that, be careful not to just kind of, put himself too far out there, throw himself into a room and then suddenly be faced with 2 LGs. No matter the stack you're on, that is going to melt you when you're up against Tox. So both players definitely have some tools in their kit for this matchup.
And we're going to return to the norm in terms of champions as well. So that's always going to be a nice thing to see a little bit more normality in the duel.
Yeah, that first one, that's... Again, it's just a very strange opener, especially because it's the first one. Everything except for Anarchy was the one that was banned, was still out in the open. You can go Doom, you can go Slash, you can go, you can go Athena. There's so many solid picks. So for it to be Nyx versus Clutch is just bewildering.
Why do that when you've already perfected all other champions, though, right? You gotta push the boat out.
Now, it looks like we are about to load into this map. Based on the performance that we just saw, then I don't imagine you're inclined to change your prediction to now start favoring Tox instead.
No. I'm gonna stick
very
with
simple.
it. I'm gonna stick with it. It was definitely more respectable than I thought it was going to be, but still, I thought Tox wasn't looking as sharp as we've seen him in the past mechanically, and the timing wasn't there either. So he has to clean that up, because we know how hard this map can snowball if you don't do those two things well.
True. All right, well, let's see how this is gonna go. We've got Av3k on the Ranger with the Orb, Tox on the BJ with that dual wield. And once again, no railgun on the map that is Corrupted Keep. Quite unique in that sense, and that means that the heavy machine gun is kind of going to replace the go-to weapon for those long-distance fights.
1, fight.
We're starting it off on the perspective of Av3k. He's gonna get the LG side, as well as the Mega and the rockets. Definitely a bit of a weapon advantage for Av3k, as long as he can avoid getting rushed down with a super shotgun. And since he's the Ranger with the Orb, he shouldn't have any issues accomplishing that.
No, but often the decisive factor on this particular map is always going to be that mid to long range spam and chip damage. Whoever can be more efficient with that will often get the upper hand in these engagements, which are often so incredibly close. It comes down to the first rocket, which is a little bit of extra damage from that you do prior to the fight.
Now, we briefly mentioned it earlier, weapon denial, stopping your opponent from getting a weapon. And this is one of the examples that I gave back then. LG on Corrupted Keep. Such a tricky weapon to get a hold of because it's a vulnerable position. Once you get in there, very difficult to get back out. And toxjq, 1 minute in, hasn't even touched the LG, which some might say is his signature weapon. Oh, that is a lot of damage. I think he hits 2, like, direct tri-bolts, which is a massive amount of damage.
I mean,
if all of them connect, it's more than a direct rocket.
Tox loves a tri-bolt, so it's a lot of damage. Resets the duel.
I mean, that couldn't have ended in a better way for Tox, right? After how the engagement started with the weapons that he was lacking. This is perfect for him. It's essentially just a reset, right? Everything's basically kept the same, only this time he does have rockets. He does have LG.
Exactly.
So, perfect.
That was definitely the best of a bad situation. Slightly awkward, but they do reset. They both trade in these major items, which are pretty much on the exact timing. Tox actually making his move over to the Mega side of the map. Lovely Tribot coming out. Has that heavy machine gun as well, so he's quite confident to trade with Av3k here. He's doing a decent enough job, but Av3k's in position to fall back. Wow.
toxjq has done 500 out of his 600 damage with just the tripod. Not something you see every day. Oh, big nail gun.
What?
185 points of damage. He should get the kill now. I was definitely expecting him to just look down with LG or rockets and finish it up right there, but toxjq persisting with the tri-bolt will finally clean it up, switching to perhaps a bit more reliable weapon. And now Mega's about to spawn. Tox is in position, heavy, up at around the same time. I like that. Getting a bit more damage in, prioritizing heavy instead. Good play from Tox.
Yeah, he's doing an amazing job. Talked about how important all this little amounts of damage is. Adds up so much. He's out of rockets, but...
We talk about the Tox click, but the double click is quite something, right? I don't think I've heard a lot of click before, and then twice in a row as well. Tox needs to keep an eye on his ammo as well. Just 2 more rockets to go and he'll be out again. Okay, another 90 damage out of the tri-bolt.
I've never seen so much tri-bolt used. It's insane.
And so effectively too.
Yeah, it's not just...
Yeah, it's not just spamming for the sake of it. This is pretty consistent damage, or as consistent as tri-bolt's going to be.
It's all about those water balloons.
It's all about the fashion, right? Oh, but that is not fashionable at all. Tox kind of losing track of his opponent completely in that situation. Messified through the teleporter. Here we go, dual LG comes out. Tox, the orb, Flies on past him, puts Av3k in a better position to take that fight. But here we go, Tox again, Tribal, 66 points of damage, can't clean it up, both players hurting. But it's Av3k who recovers his stack first. Ooh, good amount of damage with the starting machine gun. Here we go, rocket and a midi as well.
Nice. Hey, once
Unfortunately
again.
for Tox, there was a trade. Otherwise, he would have been able to just take the Mega, get all the weapons he needed. So,
oh my word, so much damage. But Tox a little bit overzealous there. Yes, he made the best of a bad situation, but this is when, you know, decent plays can turn into terrible moments where Tox just doesn't take his foot off the accelerator. You know, what was a 1-2 frag game is now a 4 frag game. And if Tox continues to push, it could be 5, 6, or 7 frags in a blink of an eye sometimes. So this is where restraint is needed. It's just knowing that limitation of how much you've done. Oh, actually been pushed in aggressively by the Tribolt there.
this is obscene, then. The Tribolt and the nail gun, plasma. It feels like Tox is using those more than rockets and LG. Pretty unheard of.
Oh, nice.
Almost looked like a ring out, but Kilson, or Av3k rather, what am I saying? Av3k still keeping himself within bounds. Oh, that's a nice, two big rockets. This is an opportunity for Tox. He's taken away so much of Av3k's stack. There we go, Super Solid to clean it up. 4 minutes, 6 frags. Gonna be tight, but this is Corrupted Keep. If he can start building momentum now, he may still have a shot.
Double tripod. So dumb. It's so dumb. He's actually got the
Tox has invested in Tribal stocks and he wants to see them go up. Man's on fire with that weapon. Unfortunately for him, the scoreline doesn't quite reflect that. Here we go, catches Av3k. Good LG, murderous. Forces out to spawn as well. There we go, this should be another frag. Dan, is he gonna do it? Lost a lot of health though. Mega is there. Comforting embrace of that 100 health injection. Back to the Tribolt.
There we go,
This
the
is
trusty Tribolt.
doable.
I mean, it's definitely doable. He's making it happen. He needs to keep this rotation up. There's a big split between the major items, 16 seconds. It's perfect if he can keep this amount of damage up. Av3k's actually gone full retreat now. You can see him sitting over by the rocket area, slowly making his way around. Tox is a little bit lost, but there comes the Tribolt. He knows his opponent is in Tribolt territory. So double Tribolts once again.
This is wonderful. toxjq, more damage with the Tribolt. Well, not anymore, but before that fight, he had more damage with Tribolt than with LG and rockets combined. And here we go. Oh, we're gonna get a repeat. Ah, the rockets. Doesn't quite connect. He's gotta be careful. Av3k can really shut down the entrance to that room. He's got 2 health bubbles to work with too. Oh, the orb! And Av3k walks away with the Mega. This is disastrous for toxjq. Can he even escape?
I mean, he's trying his best. Av3k's got him pinned up here. He knows how low he is, but he's got to be wary of the Tribolt because I guarantee you it's coming. 2 of them in a second. Oh, no, stays with the LG. And does! Oh, I thought he managed to get out. Just did enough from Av3k's POV. There's still plenty of time left to get this comeback, but it is going quickly. Av3k picking up both major items now. It's massive for him, and he's got Tox pinned once again. He doesn't want to let him get out.
toxjq just running out of Tribolt. That was the death sentence right there. Oh, big plays, aggressive push from Av3k. Orb right next to him. Oh, this is good amount of machine gun damage. toxjq abusing the head glitch right there, showing only the very tip of his head, making it so difficult for his opponent to hit him while he was able to do a fair amount. LG comes out, he's gonna go for the rocket jump, I like that.
Yeah,
Didn't quite
nice.
get the trajectory down, but still walks away with the item. 1 minute left to go. 3 frags. Very difficult, but possible on this map.
Oh, here comes the tribal once again. Flying it. Oh my God. I'm not gonna lie, that was fucking scary seeing that from Av3k's pop. Just Tox running at you with double tribal, just exploding around Av3k. Still got 30 seconds to go. Tox can make this happen. He's tribal's out once again. Huge amounts of damage. Av3k has used his last orb of the match. If Tox can get a frag here somehow, he can definitely make this happen. But no, Av3k had enough with the heavy machine gun. Tox forced to go aggressive, and it's just not to be.
He had to push through after that fight in the red room. That was his shot. The moment that he didn't pursue Av3k and allowed him to get the distance and then get the orb bag and teleport out of there, that's...
I'm not gonna lie, Av3k's gonna have PTSD.
Look at
from
Av3k's
those...
reaction. Look, I saw Av3k on the cam right there. That's the face of a man who just suffered through 10 minutes of abuse, even though he came out on top. 1,500 points of damage with the tribal alone. Toxic, madman.
That was just crazy. We just saw, you know, From versus Kilson of just 10 minutes of slow, methodical play, and we just saw 10 minutes of Tox running around, spamming water balloons, non-stop. Doesn't care about the walk button, doesn't care about silence. But that was fun and that was entertaining, and that's what we want to see. And you know, it was
absolutely.
But just one of the matchup once again where it's so close but so far for Tox. Definitely could have pulled about a comeback there, just wasn't to be. And as entertaining as it was to watch his strategy, it was effective. The amount of damage he did with that tribal was absurd.
I think some players are going to take note of that. We're going to go into Quake on, and all of a sudden, tribal meta starting right here, right now. 1,500
damage with the tribal.
Yeah.
But again, the big difference there is just the efficiency across the board for Av3k. You can see 1,300 damage with the heavy machine gun, you know, 1,800 damage with the lightning gun. It was just that efficiency in and around that tribal that Av3k came out on top with. But otherwise, they were pretty much bang on even with the items.
Yeah, that was... I mean, that was a solid performance from Tox. I mean, the tribals... We were talking earlier about, you know, unorthodox plays being so valuable at this point of the competition, and that was more than just a little surprising. Toxic just going all in on the tribals. I do think that there were some situations where, you know, hindsight's 2020, right? But he probably should have just switched for the LG, especially when they were mid LG fight and Tox just straight up switches to tribal. But
yeah, man.
Overall, I think it worked out better than I think anyone would expect if you use tribal that often.
I mean, it's definitely a strategy, and there's moments where it was working gloriously, but there's definitely moments where other weapons would have been preferable. So, but it was a good matchup. We've seen 2 relatively close matchups in a row. You know, I think some people may be surprised, but you're both playing at a decent level. Match 1 was a bit more interesting in the Clutch versus the Knicks. Map 2 was more interesting because of the choice of weaponry. Maybe we'll get something slightly more stable on map 3 when we're going on to Vale now with the Death Knight against an Ison.
Gonna be another interesting map, right? Both champions work really well here. Ison, super powerful. There's a lot of bounce pads, a lot of teleporters in critical positions. Using that Ison turret can give you a lot of information, but also, you know, divide your opponent's attention, get some free damage in as well. On the other hand, Death Knight can work out quite nicely as well. Very many choke points on this map. So many areas where that flame strike can be used to really zone your opponent off or get that burst damage and completely turn a fight around. So both players, you know, generally speaking, I would favor Ison here, but Tox has got an opportunity, to be sure.
Yeah, I think Ison offers you a little bit more stability, whereas the Death Knight, it can turn a fight on its head, as you say. Even if your opponent is almost fully stacked, if you run into them in one of those choke points, it could turn a fight around and open up the map for you, which can be invaluable. But at the same time, if you use it and you completely whiff, then your opponent, your champion, is almost useless for the next 30, 40 seconds. Whereas the Ison, you put the turret down, as long as it's in a decent position, it has a lot of utility. Even if it doesn't do any damage, it might block, it might give you some information. That is not to be discounted at this level. Even the information of your opponent killing a turret can be massive sometimes. So,
absolutely. Now, warm-up has finished. Both players have readied up. Starting it off, this is the final map of this series. So for those of you just joining us, Av3k will have already taken the overalls win, coming out on top in the first 2 maps, but let's see if Tox can get himself some points, some of that cold hard cash on the final map, Veil of Nav. toxjq opening with the tribal.
Yeah, so it begins.
So it begins then. So it begins. Oh, there we go. I think Av3k at this point, he's gonna be shaking his head. He's like, oh god, not again. He's gonna have PTSD after this.
If this was a scrim, I would just quit right now. I'm not doing this again.
Nice bit of damage from toxjq. Keeping Av3k at bay. Neither player interested in committing to an all-out fight just yet. toxjq holding down the mega side of the map. But toxjq definitely has the better positioning right now, because he can make a play both on mega as well on heavy, and he's in the perfect position for that. Going to prioritize heavy, knowing that he should still have an opportunity to at least defend mega or get some good damage. Here we go, LG comes out. That's a lot of damage. That's a lot of damage. 234 to be precise. Av3k does manage to survive and even turns it around.
Nice.
Excellent awareness from Av3k to line up that shot. Perfect read from his opponent as well.
Exactly. No, huge damage from Tox once again, but as you said, the awareness and positioning of Av3k was just enough. Flame Strike coming out, there will be enough. They do trade, so good for Av3k. Who's going to get the better spawn? It's going to be Av3k.
Ends up in the flames though, so toxjq will be able to kind of get a good read on his position and at least burn off some. And by now, all of that overstack that Av3k might have gotten by picking up the heavy first. So actually, Tox has the advantage in terms of stack. Both players pretty well equipped when it comes to weapons. toxjq lacking the railgun though. It's gonna have to venture down below to that bottom side of the map to pick up that critical weapon. And the railgun is exactly what Av3k has been using to such great effect.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's Railgun versus Tribal at the moment, which is not, you know, a traditional matchup. But Tox is quite happy playing around that Tribal, and it's not even a meme. He's making good utility once again, but he's got to be careful he doesn't overexpose himself. As fun as it is to watch, he is leaving himself a little bit vulnerable to Av3k's rail at the moment. Big damage coming out from both, and turret from above. Av3k gets away.
That's the pressure of the turret, right? It can do, you know, Tox! I was still on Av3k's point of view, but that must have been a beautiful shot. And again, see, Tox has to linger. He has to delay to take down the turret. And those few seconds, Dan, just stopped him from going to the teleporter and making a move onto the heavy. Allowing Av3k to just drop down, swoop in, steal it away. Now, I think that if Tox had just gone for the heavy, probably wouldn't have ended very well for him anyway, based on the weapons that he had, but it just shows the utility of the turrets and trying to distract and delay your opponent.
Really nice. And it's the smallest of margins, as you say. It delays an opponent 1 or 2 seconds, but at this level, when these players are executing so perfectly, that's enough time for Av3k to get back in to get the frag. So those things make such a big difference. Turret goes down once again, but the Av3k's LG is remarkable. Actually melts Tox there, who gets the mega mid-fight, but has to reset. And now Av3k's going to say hello to my little friend with his own Tribal.
Surprised toxjq backed out of that fight though. Av3k was literally a lick of LG away from dying, and has now been able to get all of his health back. Now toxjq is in position for heavy. How is he going to approach this? He doesn't just want to commit to heavy and allow Av3k to get out of the room and onto the mega. There we go. toxjq played that quite nicely. should be able to get both of the items like this. Takes a little bit of damage, but that won't slow him down all that much. And actually, Av3k going for the sneaky jump, the teleporter out of the map. Doesn't see all that much use, but situationally, it can be a very effective tool to reposition.
Definitely, but Tox has now got the whole map at his disposal. Av3k's going to have to play very carefully. Wants to hit a rail, but knows he's been scouted down there, so will be repositioning to try and defend this Mega, and does so. He has that turret available, so he's confident to take this fight. Tox goes up, but gets absolutely smacked back down by the turret and eats 3 pretty much direct rockets.
The turret, man. It is proving instrumental to Av3k's game plan. I feel like Tox has been struggling more with the turret than I've seen in a long time. Just the amount of value that Av3k's been able to get out of it. Remarkable. Feels like the turret is there for every single major fight. Here again, Tox. Turret's in his back, LG in the front. There we go. Av3k walks away with the kill and the item. Oh, Tox. Big flame strike. But the healing bubble is there. And there again, right? toxjq pushes in. Oh, turret is there. toxjq has to switch, or he just bombed, has to use standard machine gun to take it down. That tells Av3k everything he needs to know, knows exactly where toxjq is. And by the time that Tox has finally killed the turret with that standard machine gun, here we go. There's Av3k.
Yep, and I guess I'll just repeat my point because I was muted on VMix, but I was just saying that, you know, Tox isn't doing any pre-work for these frags. He's making these all-or-nothing plays where he's not doing his due diligence to get rid of the turret, scout the turret. In the previous frag where he just rocket jumps into a turret, it's questionable as to what is actually going to happen in that situation. Tox is never going to come off in a better situation there, so he just needs to be smarter.
And Av3k, yet another frag on the board. And I think that at this point, Dan, it is bordering on the impossible for Tox. 11 frags of a deficit, and with the way that he's been playing, the way that Av3k's been approaching this, I really don't see how the Swede is able, or might be able, to get himself back into it. And see, again, toxjq fires his first rail, not at Av3k, at the turret. And that allows... Yeah, you gotta love those, right? toxjq, he never ceases to entertain. But ultimately, I think this is gonna be a clear 3-0 win for Av3k.
Yeah, but can we really say he won when Tox played with the tribot like he did? Like, no, this is well played by Av3k, to be fair. We've seen different sides of his game in this series so far. This one was a bit more of a blowout because Tox decided just to go full force aggression. Didn't really play strategically whatsoever. But yeah, it's nice to see Av3k back. Once again, we see now Tox going 5 weeks in a row without a single map. That is painful going into the finals.
Indeed, that doesn't bode well at all. And I'm actually not sure. No, I think this is Tox's last appearance in the weeklies before QuakeCon. I think this is his final match that he has to play, and that he won't make an appearance next week. So that means that he is unable to close the season, or at least the weekly portion of the season, with at least some, you know, success towards the very end.
Yeah, that's got to sting, right?
Yeah.
That's got to sting. It'd be nice to see Tox going into QuakeCon in good shape, because we know when he plays his best, he can still compete with the best.
Yeah.
But as we say, every single week, it's few and far between where we see that level of Tox's play on any sort of consistent level for multiple games, or even within a game itself. And the QPL is at such a high level nowadays where you can't afford to make mistakes, particularly some of the critical ones that we do see from Tox. So if he wants any sort of chance of having a run at the finals, which he has the capability and experience to do, he just needs to, as Av3k signs up.
Yeah, Av3k. A heart to all the supporters and fans. Well played, well played.
Yeah.
That's the face of a man who's been peppered with tribal for 2 straight maps, Dan, if you were wondering. But yeah, Av3k, congratulations, convincing win over Tox, 3-0 toxjq. Still a month before QuakeCon, right? I think that's the thing that we have to mention, at least towards the end. toxjq, as far as I know, he's got more time to play. Has to put less focus on work. I think he's on holiday, has got plenty of opportunity right now to just focus more on his game, get those matches in, practice, 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 or as Gilson would say, focus, moving into QuakeCon, and hopefully then, like you said, we can really see him bring his best play.
Yes, he can go back to playing a bit. He is obviously streaming, and so people could check that out. But we need to see more mental discipline from Tox than anything else. It's just, there's that lovely rail once again. It's just that strategy, because, you know, moves like that, what do you expect to happen? You know, you're rocket jumping into a turret, into a prepared opponent. So there's many fruitless and low IQ moves that we see from Tox for all of the greatness that comes out, and so he needs to cut that out of his game to make any sort of progress. So well played by Av3k. It's good to see him back after a couple of weeks away, and he's sitting decently in the leaderboard as well. Tox obviously not so much, but they both have to go through the groups.
I mean, Av3k, he was in 9th place. This 3-0 victory is definitely not gonna hurt him, and I also think actually that this was his final match of the weeklies. So the points that he's going to get today are going to signify his final score. So Av3k currently at exactly $4,000 in earnings. So that's gonna bump him up to 4,450 points. And yeah, let's see what that ends up doing with his placement after next week matches.
Yeah, exactly. Got a little bit to go, so maybe he can move on up. But we've seen 2 polar opposite series in some regards. You know, the first one much more clinical from Kilson's POV. This one a bit more erratic. But we're going to go into a completely different series with the NA boys next in Psyche versus Strong Sage. We'll be back just in a few minutes after this break. See you then.